Hi. Hi. Welcome, everyone. We are here today with Ronnie Citron-Fink and Yvette Walker. We all want to thank Sean Murphy and everyone involved in 1455 for inviting us and putting on such an amazing festival. We are here today to talk about hair and why hair is so important and why it's important now. I just want to remind viewers that we are all authors with books that we hope you'll be interested in buying. You can support the Potter's House book sales on the Literary Festival website, and the books will be shipped to your door. This is a nonprofit bookstore and cafe in event space in Washington, D.C., with a deep history of social justice and community building. And please support them. I'm going to introduce myself and our panelists, and then we're going to start talking about a subject that is near and dear and very close to us physically and otherwise. Ronnie Citron-Fink is the author of True Roots, What Quitting Hair Dye Taught Me About Health and Beauty, and she is the editorial director for the Environmental Defense Fund's Mom Clean Air Force. Yvette Walker is the publisher of Hair Goddess, an anthology of essays about natural hair, and she writes for Curl magazine. She is the host of a wonderful podcast called Positively Joy, and she is an assistant dean at the University of Oklahoma. And before that, she worked as a newspaper editor and writer. And I am Elizabeth Benedict. I've written 5 novels, and I've edited 3 anthologies, one of which is called Me, My Hair, and I. And that's the reason I know, that's the reason we all know each other. And my book is 27 Women, Untangle an Obsession. And what I was interested in was talking to women about why we are so interested in our hair. And that the book came out in 2015, and Yvette Walker at the time was at the Oklahoman, and she was the first person to review the book in a newspaper. And of course,
did not know that. Wow.
Yes, you were. And of course, you know what that's like. I mean, you looking up yourself on Google because your book has just come out and you're a nervous wreck. And then there was this wonderful review with your photograph on it.
Okay.
And I was, of course, thrilled. And I've never forgot you. And I think we corresponded a little. Mm-hmm. And one of the issues in the book was the issue of going gray. And at the time, I was not going gray. I was determined to keep dyeing my hair. And I paired my No, I Won't Go Gray essay with an essay by Anne Creamer, who wrote a book on going gray. And so she went gray, and then I was like, no, I'm not going to go gray. And about 2 months after I handed the book in, I had a hairdresser that I sort of had a little crush on. And he dyed my hair shoe polish black and instead of brown. Oh. And it was, and in order, as you may know, in order to go back to a lighter color, it takes months and months and months. And it's like writing a book. I mean, it's a very long project and also expensive. And I kind of knew that that hair dye was not a great thing to put in your hair. And so I decided with my shoe polish black hair that was the end of dyeing my hair. And that's how I met Ronnie Citron-Fink, who I guess we met on Facebook, right?
I think I read your book, and I got a review copy of your book. Editor, I get review copies, so I requested one. And then I contacted you, or through probably your publisher, and we connected in person.
But yes, I remember our connection, but I sort of think there was some Facebook activity because you had been writing about going gray. And that actually turned out to be the most sort of political subject in the book. And I had published an essay in the book on pubic hair, and everybody was a little nervous about it, but nobody batted an eyelash about pubic hair. It was like going gray. That was the issue. It was like, are we going to be our age, or are we going to keep faking it? You know, that was the big issue. And so Ronnie and I was then going gray, and Ronnie had already done the deed. And so we've been in touch since then. And I don't know whether you were writing your book, but 2 years later, a year ago, you published True Roots about the dangers, the chemical dangers of hair dye.
Right.
And
I wrote a beautiful blurb on the back of my book.
For a wonderful book, a very important book on the dangers of hair dye. And anyway, that's kind of how we all know each other. And I wanted to ask each of you to read for a few minutes from your books. And I'm going to read for just 2 minutes from Me, My Hair, and I from the introduction, because it sort of sets the stage for the subject of hair and why hair matters. Ask a woman about her hair, and she just might tell you the story of her life. Ask a whole bunch of women, and if Me, My Hair, and I is any indication, you could get a history of the world. Reflections and revelations about family, race, religion, ritual, culture, politics, celebrity, what goes on in African American kitchens and at Hindu Bengali weddings in Calcutta. What's abundantly clear in all of these personal stories is that hair matters. Many other facts of life matter too, oftentimes more than hair. But hair can be counted on to matter just about every day, at least to a high percentage of women and to more than a few men. The Beatles' long hair, when it first shimmied and shook on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964, in time to I Want to Hold Your Hand, changed the course of social history. As I read and reflect on these essays, I'm struck by just how much hair matters to so many of us and by the tangled intricacies of why. Why so much and why with this intensity? I'll just leave it there. And I think probably we'll be kind of talking, or I hope by the end you'll know why, or you'll be thinking more about why, and thinking about your own hair and your kids' hair and your friends' hair and your grandmother's hair. And so hair matters. Yvette, why don't you read from your book next?
Okay, so this is from Hair Goddess, and which is a compilation of essays from lots of different people, and mostly women, one man, and also ethnicities, different ethnicities. So this is mainly about identity. The women in my family have thick, long, coarse hair. That's a blessing and a curse. A blessing from the point of view of women who have thinning hair, a curse from the point of view of my comb and my tender scalp. When I was a girl, my mother sent me to my best friend's mother for the every other week press and curl. This was a ritual where she would wash my hair, comb it out, dry it under a bonnet dryer, apply hair grease, and then straighten it with heat. Here, heat means a metal comb and a gas stove burner. The hot comb was a multi-sensory experience. The heat of the fire burning your skin, the sound of the grease sizzling as the hot comb moved down from scalp to end, and the smell of the hair singeing. Oh yes, there was burning of hair every time. Even the most experienced women, be it professional beautician or home kitchen stylist, burned hair and skin during a hot comb procedure. Maybe just a little, maybe a lot. The burn made you jump, and that caused the hot comb to jump and maybe burn you again. It certainly vexed the wielder of the comb, who would tongue lash you with the words, "Sit still, little girl." Little black girls endured the hot comb until chemical relaxers became mainstream and were sold on drugstore shelves. Relaxers were developed in the early 1900s, but it wasn't until the late 1970s did you begin to see easily accessible home perm kits. I got a relaxer at a salon when I was a sophomore in high school. All through high school, I wore a Farrah Fawcett. And in college, I got bangs with long sides. When I graduated, it became a side part with fringy upturned ends and later side swept bangs. I loved my swingy, bouncing, and behaving hair. I loved it for decades, but I had to let it go. From the relaxers, my hair had become damaged and something had to be done. That something was going natural, and here I am today. I've learned that looking professional with natural hair is not an oxymoron. There are myriad styles a woman can rock in the classroom, in the workplace, and even in the boardroom. Yes, I've heard the stories. The woman whose boss told her to take the day off when she came in with a big afro. The intern whose employer told him to cut off his dreadlocks if he wanted to complete the internship. A woman can achieve a winning style in a business setting. If that's your fear, you can let that go. Natural hair needn't make you a loser at work. It only takes your self-confidence and a put-together office ensemble to make it work. Many others have come to the same conclusion. The journey may be different, but we've all passed the finish line.
Thank you, Ronnie.
That's great. So I'm going to read from True Roots, What Quitting Hair Dye Taught Me About Health and Beauty, which published in June last year. And I'm going to read, it's from the first chapter. I have an introduction to the book too, but this is from the first chapter that's called Hair is Life. How'd you do it? Are you doing that on purpose? Are you okay? Ever since I stopped coloring my silver hair, I've gotten a lot of questions. One of the most common during my hair transition was, why are you letting your hair go gray? Well, my roots didn't ask permission before they stopped growing in dark brown. It was a complex mix of fear and determination that rearranged my beauty priorities. The question of why after 25 years of using chemical dyes, I gave them up, is something I've thought a lot about. My world began to shift 4 years ago. I was sitting in a meeting about toxic chemical reform in Washington, D.C., when an environmental scientist began to describe the buildup of chemicals in our bodies. As she rattled off a list of ingredients in personal care products, my scalp started to tingle. We're just beginning to understand how these chemicals compromise long-term health, she concluded. None of this was new information for me. As a journalist, I report on the intersection of health and the environment. I know that soaps, shampoos, and lotions we use every day have been linked to threats such as hormone disruption, birth defects, and cancer. I know that since World War II, more than 80,000 new chemicals have been invented. And while most people assume that these chemicals in our products have been tested and proven safe, I know that this is not the case. Time and time again, I've seen regulators fail to protect the health of citizens. Yet all that knowing didn't stop me from availing myself to the alchemical wonders of hair dye. Frankly, coloring just seemed normal. My mother still dyed her hair a coppery brown at age 88. My best friend, Kathy, went to the colorist every few weeks. And even my daughter dabbled in hair in highlights. It's no surprise that I didn't and still don't know many people who forgo coloring. 75% of women in the United States use hair dye. Like many, I colored with the hope of natural looking hair, spending hours and hours and thousands of dollars per year at the salon. Over the years, I'd pushed aside fears about the possible dangers of dyes. After visits to the hairdresser, my scalp would itch, which I chalked up to dryness. And I would get headaches, which I blamed, like almost all other ailments during my childbearing years, on hormones. When I scratched my head, dye would stain my fingernails for days after application. A small price to pay for beauty, I rationalized. I simply did not want to think about that noxiously charged question, is hair dye safe? A young colleague at the toxics meetings was more skeptical. Wiping the lipstick from her unlined lips, she asked, why do we subject our bodies to questionable chemicals? I could personally attest to the scientist's answer. People ignore potential risks for convenience, cost, and beauty. Many of these products promise a fountain of youth. After the presentation, a group of mostly women discussed the health compromises people make to look young and feel good. Scanning a handout with a long list of chemicals and personal care products, I decided it was past time to stop burying my beautifully dyed head in the sand. How do I go about researching the toxicity of hair dye and its effects on me and others, I asked. The scientist's answer led me up to the journey that would become this book. The economic success of hair coloring collides so powerfully with popular demand that the risk of understanding the landscape goes beyond science and law. She said, investigate that and you'll find some answers that address the safety of hair dye.
I have another question, but I think you might have answered it, but let's just talk for a minute. I think that for a lot of people, the subject of women and their hair has a frivolous, superficial sound. And I think for each of us, we've had to overcome that prejudice on the subject with what we've written, why we've written it. But could you each sort of talk about why hair matters? I mean, I think Ronnie just did, to a great extent about the hair dye, but talk about how you came to write about hair and I guess why it mattered so much. And as writing projects, did you feel you were writing something very personal or very, that you were exposing things, or what was your kind of relation to the subject as you were writing it, since we're talking about craft?
Well, for me, it was very personal because I had made the decision to grow the relaxer out of my hair. And I mention the word relaxer in the book. It's the chemical that straightens your hair. And lots of different people, lots of different ethnicities may use a relaxer, but most people, I guess, think about this idea of hair straightening when it comes to African-American or ethnicities that have a kind of a curlier, thicker grade of hair. And so I had made the decision to wean myself off of that, and a couple things have to happen. And when we were first beginning, you were talking about, your hair coloring situation. So the relaxer itself can make your hair appear to be strong, but when you begin to grow it out, and I'll just say, so I have curly hair, and at the end, when you're growing it out, the impact between where the hair curls and the straight hair causes a very brittle, weak point. So basically, most people have to get their hair cut off pretty severely. Some people try and grow it out, but we call it the big chop. Most of us decide to get the big chop when we're deciding to go from straightened hair to basically the hair that's growing out of our head. And so that's about appearance and identity. If you've been wearing your hair, like Ronnie talked about coloring her hair for 25 years. And by the way, yes, Ronnie, actually, I still do color my hair a bit. I've said that when I go 70, that's going to be my line of demarcation, but we'll see.
Younger than I was when I started, so I was still coloring at your age.
Really? Okay. But yeah, so you are trying to present yourself at work, present yourself maybe to romantic partners or whatever, and you're going from a very, very different look of having straightened hair to a look of a curlier look. And trust me, in the beginning, you don't know what to do with your hair. You really don't know how to style it or handle it, because I've been relaxing my hair since I was, as you heard, since I was in high school. And I'm many, many years past that. So I didn't even really know how to handle my own hair. So that's why I began talking to other people about it and talking to people about their hair journeys and writing about it.
It's interesting, Ronnie, before we get to your answer, when I was thinking about this question, I think one of the reasons I wanted to do the book is to start conversations. I mean, there are certain things that you can write a book about and you can just tell your own personal story. And your personal story or your story as a journalist and doing research is really interesting. But with hair, there isn't one story, there are a million stories, and they all kind of can be added together, and they can talk to each other. And so I think it's really, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to do my anthology, so that we'd have conversations about it. And it would kind of open the door and say, hey, this is serious stuff. It's not frivolous. We're not talking about hairstyles. We're not talking about, how to look great. We're talking about the meaning of hair and hair and identity. So writing about it starts conversations in the way that, you may not want for every subject. You may not need for every subject. Ronnie.
Yeah, exactly. I think, it's so interesting because when we look at someone, we see hair before we look at their eyes, before we look at the color of their eyes. So we make these, hair sends all these different kinds of messages. It tells us, it's something about our age. It tells us about our race. It tells us about our authenticity. And all of these messages come with subliminal messages that we get from the media. And in terms of, it's a $70 billion industry, the hair and beauty industry. So we get these messages and we pass them down. I also, right in the beginning of my book, I talk of True Roots. I kind of talk about how my identity came to me, and to be really honest with you, my hair was always my best beauty asset. And everybody commented it. I had this long, kind of straight, shiny, Cher-like hair. And it gave me a certain amount of, pride. I loved it. So the idea of giving it up, to giving up this piece of my identity, was huge. It was so huge, I had to write a whole book about it because I really felt really strongly like it was such a big part of me. And in fact, I started at the beginning of the book. In Japan, there's this saying that a girl's life is her hair. And in so many ways, there's so much that evolves. I mean, hair can tell you something about your health. There are so many different messages that it gives. So yes, it's such a big part of our identity that I think with this pandemic, it's been brought up to the surface in a lot of ways, as we see in celebrities that, with gazillion Instagram followers, and you can see their roots, whether or not, they're blonde and they have the dark roots, or they're a little bit older and they have gray roots. And some celebrities have decided to go gray. And there were very few examples of it that I could find 5 or 6 years ago when I started writing the book. There was like Jamie Lee Curtis, and she cut her hair really short. She has really short hair. And since part of my identity was personally having long hair, the idea of cutting my hair like a pixie was just, that was worse than going gray. I would have done anything not to do that. That was just me personally. So many people just do it and they're done. For me, growing it out was part of the process, and also part of the, becoming this new person that still has this old, long hair.
Yeah.
Right.
So that brings me to why we're here today on Zoom instead of in real life, which is just to get personal for a minute and then sort of take this broader, but how has your hair routine changed during the pandemic?
Completely.
Okay, well, go for it.
Haven't had a haircut in 7 months. I've never gotten that long.
Okay.
I mean, for me, I remember. So I work at a college, and I really can wear my hair any way I want, but I typically, my routine is typically to wear straighter styles during the school year when I'm teaching and things like that. And then in the spring, summer, I just let it go curly because it's too hot to try to straighten it and do that. And sometimes, and I also have curly styles during the year. So you got to remember, my hair was still straight. The pandemic started like right at spring break.
But can I just ask, you're relaxing your hair?
No.
You were. No.
When I haven't relaxed my hair since I want to say 2013.
Okay.
When I wear my hair straight, it's just through blow drying. You can achieve a straight style through blow drying it straight and using a flat iron. Okay. It just doesn't last very long.
I see.
So you got to remember it was straight at the time. Mm-hmm. But then when we were unable to go to the salons, I'm not very competent at straightening my hair and making it look good. So now I'm washing my hair myself, then it's just going to go curly. So that forced my curly style, my natural style. And I call my hair natural anyway, because I'm not putting any chemicals on it except for color. So Ronnie, sorry, but I'm not putting straightening chemicals on it right now, and haven't been, so I call myself natural, but it was just, trying to, obviously you've got to take care of your hair, even though you can't go to the salon. So I'm washing, I'm conditioning it, but there's no way I'm going to straighten my hair right now because I'm not good at it. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I go to the salon for that. So that was kind of a turning point. Whereas maybe I would have kept my hair straight through graduation, because trust me, trying to put a graduation cap on this hair is very, very difficult. So it just kind of it made that decision a lot earlier. So I've just been curly since then, and certainly my gray roots were showing big time. But I will say this, when my hair is curly, there's lots of volume and lift. You can't see the gray as much as when it's straight.
Okay.
I had skunk, an absolute skunk. I had black hair here and then this skunk right on my
And so Ronnie, has it been strange to just let your hair grow out and not try to do things with it, or are you just okay with it? I mean,
I'm pretty okay with it now.
Yeah.
I'm used to it, but I am pretty hair obsessed. I mean, it's always been a bit of a hair obsession. So, I love getting my hair cut. I love going to the salon. I love my hairdresser, who was coming to my house during the whole grow out period. But he's too far away now. And I have not. I usually keep my hair, I don't know, a few inches less. I just haven't done anything. So it's kind of ragged at the end. And I remember him, Richard, my hairdresser, saying, "Your hair will look great in any gray style, except for witchy." And I thought, what does that mean? What does witchy mean? And now I'm kind of feeling a little bit like the ends are getting there. But what's interesting to me is that I've had a lot of inquiries about my book, about True Roots, during this period because of people wanting to go gray. And I can see, when you go to Amazon and you check the numbers, and you also can see what people are buying with your book. And it's like the pack, Ann Kramer's book and my book and this other curly hair book. Those three books, Curly Silvers, I think, or something like that. And those three books seem to be really hot. And in the Going Gray has kind of an interesting culture. There's a Going Gray groups. So there are these social media groups.
They're support groups. I mean, it's sort of like stopping drinking. I mean, you need support.
You need support. A lot of people ask, there are a lot of the same questions get asked, like, why can't I just dye my hair silver? That's like probably, it would make so much sense to, you got out your little skunk line here, and then why can't you just, like dye the rest of your hair silver? Well, to take your hair, and I'll just get a little into the whole thing, to take your hair from dyed, dark dyed particularly, which mine was very dark because I had very dark hair, is very incredibly damaging to your hair, and it just kind of breaks off. So the best way really to go gray, and this is discussed ad nauseum in these groups, just nonstop, like thousands and thousands of women talk about this all over the world. And the best way is just to grow it out or cut it. So.
What was I going to say? What the pandemic has done is just forced us to not do the things we're used to doing. And so the things that people kept saying, well, and my sister's is one of them, I would let my hair go gray or go white, but the process, getting from here to there is too difficult, and you look so weird. And the pandemic has just made us say, I don't have any choice. Exactly. So it's, we're backed into a corner about it. And so we're doing the weird thing that just looks weird. I saw a woman yesterday on the street who's had dark hair, and then she just had, it was like white. It was like a white crown. And I thought, you would never have done this before, So there's a new kind of acceptance of imperfection, and of I mean, we're wearing masks, those of us who believe certain things are wearing masks. So we're covering up our faces. We're making all kinds of changes to our appearance and our hair, and of necessity, and our hair is sort of one of those.
But it's certainly more, as you said, it's more acceptable because we're all going through it. But in my experience, in people like me, when we've had to make some changes and some decisions, you know, it's not under a situation like this. It's because of lots of different reasons, you know, cultural, ethnicity, or workplace situations. And so you are worried, concerned about how you will be perceived,
right,
and how that is, you know, interfering with your own personal identity and that authenticity that we were talking about.
Yeah. Yvette, I want to ask you specifically about this whole issue of discrimination against African American hair, because it's a huge issue. And there have been, I just read an article that Ronnie sent us yesterday from Vogue, written by a young woman who talks a lot about discrimination against African American hair in her essay. I posted on my Facebook page. And obviously this is a huge issue. And can you show that photograph? I don't know how you do it here.
So if I'm able to share my screen, okay, yeah, I can.
Okay.
So this is actually a friend of mine on Facebook. She is wearing braids. As you can see, her hair is in cornrow. You can see her scalp. And so her quote was, "Let the record show that even this tamed hairstyle where you can literally see my scalp was deemed unsafe enough for TSA to probe my hair without even the courtesy of changing their gloves." And she's wearing a mask. So this happened very recently. Probably the biggest and most noticeable thing happening with discrimination against hair these days is being searched at the airport when you are trying to travel. And I realize we're not traveling as much right now, but this certainly was happening certainly up until the pandemic, and there's still some travel now, as you can see from my friend who gave me permission to use her name in her photo. So if you have a non-straight style, or my friend would now argue if you have dark skin, but typically if you have a non-straight style, their explanation is, you know, we need to make sure you're not hiding anything within your hair. So for people who have a very kind of fluffy hair that doesn't lay down, hair that stands up off their head, even just a little bit, they will massage your scalp and kind of check your hair. So first of all, imagine that you're just being searched. You know how embarrassing that is. You know, this happens to everybody. They say, well, you come over here and we're going to do the pat down, and you're standing there and everyone's going by you and all eyes are on you. It's a little embarrassing. Imagine what it feels like if they're like lifting your hair and looking like they're looking for things. It makes you feel like you're unclean. It makes you feel like they're checking for whatever. It's, you know, it's crazy. So that began to happen, and a lot of people complained, and the TSA in 2015 said that they were going to stop the practice, but that has not happened. That has not happened. They are clearly still searching people's hair. But there's lots of other examples. There are examples of young people who have been told they can't participate in their graduation ceremonies unless they somehow de-blackify, I call it, de-blackify their hair, either take off braid extensions or cut their dreadlocks or cut their hair to whatever kind of manageable length that the school might accept. There are people who are told they can't go to prom with hair looking the way they do. There have been children who are told not to come back to school until their parents do something with their hair. So there's lots of examples of this.
And it's very focused on African American hair.
Yes,
styles and hair.
in particular.
I think in 2017 there was a Supreme Court ruling on dreadlocks in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
Certain states, I wrote about this in the book. Certain states have banned that you can't tell people that.
Yeah. It's called the Crown Act, and in the Crown Act there are certain states, and I'll find California, New York, New Jersey, and Virginia have passed hair discrimination laws. Yeah.
Yeah, the same thing. It happened.
But tell people what that means, the hair discrimination. I mean, it just so that you cannot discriminate against people because of their hair.
Exactly.
And, yeah. And the Crown stands for Create a Respectful and Open Workplace for Natural Hair. So it's really about African American natural hair. And
I'd also argue really any natural hair. There are Latinas that may have there are some Latinas with very straight hair, some Latinas with not as straight hair. There are different ethnicities that may not have straight hair. So I don't want to just say it's for African Americans.
Okay, but workplace for natural hair.
Yes.
That anyway. But that, and I was just doing some research. There's now there's 4 states and maybe a few counties in the country. But in most of the country, you can discriminate against people, and you can control kids and parents, and because of their hair issues. The military tried to ban certain dreadlocks, I think, and then they reversed course. So there's a long, active, history, and still going on, of these controlling people, controlling hair as a way of controlling people, and it ends up mostly falling on African Americans.
You probably don't know that you're noticing it every night, but if you watch TV news and you look at the female broadcasters, the majority of the female broadcasters do not have curly hair. There have been examples of women who have been really, really strongly encouraged. And I know I'm mainly talking about ethnic and natural hair, but I don't want to discredit my white sisters with curly hair, because I did a story for Curl Magazine about a meteorologist who actually has a beautiful head of red curls. And they told her she had to wear a wig. She could not wear those red curls on TV. So she ended up quitting that job. And now she is a meteorologist at somewhere else where they said, I'm happy to have your curls. So if you're watching TV, you are likely not there are, certain circumstances where you may see the rare few, but you are generally not seeing women with curly or any kind of a non-straight hairstyle.
Absolutely. I want to just invite people to ask questions of us, of our panel. You can go to the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen, and we'd love to know who's out there and what you're thinking and what you're wondering about hair and the pandemic, and any of the things we've talked about. So please feel free to ask questions. Hair is such an issue of control, and there's so many signifiers and so many messages in our hair. It just, when I published Me, My Hair and I, it was really a revelation to people that hair had so much information in it, and there was so much to say about it. So it's just, sometimes it's just interesting to know that that it means so much. Let me just, we got a question. Thank you so much for sharing your work today. I am learning a lot. My grandmother lived to be 88 years old, and until the day she died, she made her daughter color her hair. This was even though she suffered dementia by then, and also insisted my aunt dress her in white every day because she believed she was an angel. So yes, hair is.
That's a perfect example of how we try to please. We try to please our families as well as pleasing our employers or whoever else is around us. My mother had gorgeous gray hair. It came in beautiful streaks, like it was on purpose. My hair did not come in like that, but she grayed very early. My mother grayed when she was in her teens, and so did I. But I found my hair not as pleasing as hers, and so I've been coloring it for a long time. And there was a time after my mother passed that I decided, in homage to her, I would go gray. I was maybe 40, and I had probably had about 4 to 5 inches of gray hair was coming out. And I was at a Christmas party, and a coworker's husband well-meaning, said, "Oh, your hair is so so beautiful, the silver. You look just like Della Reese." Della Reese was 30 years older than I was at that time, and the next week I went and colored my hair.
Hair matters.
Sorry, Mom.
My sister-in-law is a Latina, and her mother would not let her and her sister cut their hair ever. They had long, black, silky hair, beautiful, and she would not let them. When I met her, and she was in college, and the minute right after she got her doctorate and became a doctor, she cut her hair really short, and kept it that way ever since. She felt like she was, but her mother, absolutely, anytime she sees a gray hair, she says, you have to color all the time. And we all get these messages. I mean, my mother, who might be watching, if she could get on, we tried to get her on before, I think she is, she has this idea about your hair being well kept. It can't be too wild. It's probably, it's way too long for her right now. I know that, but I've gotten those messages. We all get these messages about our hair, and it's so interesting. And this, Elizabeth, that people really love to talk about their hair. I find that when I'm at book talks, afterwards, people come up to me and tell me their hair stories, which are really kind of fun. Whether or not they'll go gray or not go gray, or they go long and go short. They're fun stories to tell, and it was fascinating. It's fascinating to write about it because it's universal. It's just a universal subject with mostly women, men too.
Here's a question. And what are you most insecure about your hair? So I think you just answered that, Ronnie.
That's a really good question. Excuse me. For me, I think it is when the gray starts to come in. It's not that I'm afraid to show my age. I will tell people how old I am. I'm very proud. I just had a birthday. I turned 59, so I'm just very happy that I'm still here. But I just don't think that gray peeking out. Ronnie, I think your hair is beautiful, but that process of getting it to where your hair is now, I don't like it what it looks like in the beginning. I just personally don't like it. I think it
was hard.
It's unattractive. It's just very unattractive. And so that's probably it. I was probably insecure about wearing my hair in a natural state before, but I'm no longer insecure about that.
Yeah, I have trouble because my water at my house is very hard, and hard water makes my hair kind of yellowy. So it takes the shot. It gets more matte at the bottom. You can kind of see it. So I'm most insecure about that, about the color, the color of the gray.
Okay. Oh, the color of the gray. Okay.
Color of the gray.
Okay. I want to ask something. I want to talk a little bit about the political moment that we're in. So obviously COVID, kind of made us all stay home if we were lucky, and took us away from our hairdressers and our beauty routines. And then the protests and police brutality and Black Lives Matter emerged and sort of took over some of the narrative for a while. And I've been reading a lot of articles by young African-American women who have been used to going to people who do their hair, their very elaborate braids and dreadlocks, and they are now doing that on their own. And they're also kind of thinking about what this all means. And they're also, because they're doing this on their own, they're talking to their mothers, they're writing about these issues. And there's a kind of renaissance and because of Black Lives Matter and the pandemic combined, there's a kind of renaissance in natural hair for African-American women. In a way, maybe there hasn't been, since the 60s, and people were had afros. So I think it's important, and there's an article that was in Vogue yesterday about why I don't use the term dreadlocks anymore, and this woman just calls them locks, and talking about the renaissance in natural hair for African American women. So it's very interesting to see how political hair is. It's both very personal and has to do with our vanity and our fears about aging and how we're perceived, and it's also political, and it's more or less political depending on who you are and what your history is and what your but for African Americans, it is very political. It has been very political.
It has been. Natural hair has been around a while, but natural hair in the 70s is different than natural hair today, to some degree. Yeah. And natural hair in the 70s was basically a very much a big statement saying, I am here, I am my authentic self, you can't ignore me, give me my rights.
Right.
Today, it is more of, I am here, don't ignore me, this is my authentic self. And yes, we are still fighting for rights, 100%, clearly, as we're seeing. But I think that the hair is looked upon, that 1970s civil rights hair is looked upon slightly differently than the Renaissance today. And I think that because you're right, a lot of African American women, I don't know percentages, but they will go to a salon to get their hair done. It does raise the question. So do I go back? And many will. I have since gone back because color. But it raises the question, can I really do this on my own? And let's talk about it. So a friend of mine started a Facebook group called Legacy Keepers to tell stories about culture and family. And I think places like that, if not in your own home with your own families, places like that can really be a good place to talk about these things. I think I'm going to go gray, or I think I'm going to allow my hair to be natural. What do you think about that? And how do I condition it? How do I do the best for my hair? Because a lot of people really don't have that answer until you do it, and you make a lot of mistakes along the way.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Ronnie, go ahead.
One more thing about politics, moving on, because my book is somewhat political.
Yes, indeed.
In some ways, because
very political.
Because of how the regulatory system is and how it's kind of stacked up against women and who tend to use I think it's the average of 12 beauty products every single day. And the regulations, which are health protections, are getting decimated by this particular administration. And our environmental health protections, particularly in the chemical field, and of course in our air and our water, and throughout the environment. But our personal health is something that we really have to keep an eye on, because the chemical industry has such a stronghold on politicians that we have to really be careful. And remember to vote with our dollars, and when you hear about products like Johnson & Johnson just had this big class action against a baby powder and talc, and we need to think about that. We need to boycott. We need to we have to get as political as we feel comfortable being. I've gone as far as testifying to Congress, but everybody has their paces. And one thing that we can do is we really can, along with voting, which of course we have to do, we can vote with our dollars. So, if there's, in hair dye world, there are certainly less toxic alternatives, which I have a whole chapter about, and ones that actually are better for you than some of the bigger beauty companies. And
okay, I want
about the politics.
I want to promote both of these books, but Ronnie's in particular in terms of hair dye issues. And Ronnie, how can people get in touch with you or find, I mean, they can read your book. Can people contact you? Can they go, do you have a Facebook page for your book where you might post some hair products or websites?
It's RonnieCitron-Fink.com. So you can go to there.
RonnieCitron-Fink.com, her name.com, all one word. And there are some products that you might prefer to use that are not as toxic. I think the issue of toxicity is important for our bodies, for the women or the people who do our hair, who are exposed to these toxins, yes, and also the toxins going into the drain and into the water system or into the sewage system. And it's not just like it might be bad for us. So I do want to encourage people to think about that. And if you're kind of on the fence about whether to continue dyeing, you might want to know more about the science, and it might give you information about whether you want to keep doing it. I know it was very persuasive for me when I stopped dyeing my hair. We have just like two or three more minutes. I have some questions, and they're complicated. I'm going to try to do the easy ones first. Getting your hair done is not just maintenance for many, but it's an experience and also time to gossip, get advice, see people, talk with your stylist. Do you feel like you were missing that important part of your life by not having that regular time?
That's really interesting because it was my magazine reading time. It was the time when I actually kind of just opened up a magazine. I kind of missed that a little bit, but no, I don't miss it. I learned so much, like the smells, just the, like those artificial little things of hair, all of that. It just kind of, it had hit ahead for me. And I just, I actually don't miss it.
But I guess I think what she's saying is just getting your hair done, like not even dyeing it, but
get blow dried before every hair event, except for this, obviously.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I miss, and again, she just reopened. So I did miss my, my stylist. Hers and a lot of others are like this now. There are individual studios within a larger thing. So at the most, you might have one other person in there with you now. But right now, of course, it's just you and the person. So it was always a small setting to begin with, but I missed the conversation that I had with her, and we would continue to do that online and just see each other through social media on Facebook. But I think that idea of community, is one that a lot of people do associate with hair, and certainly associate with hair as they were growing up. The boys going to barbers, the girls either going to going to somebody's house, or even if they were doing it in their own kitchen, sometimes mom had several girls that she would do. So I do think that community is really important, and no matter what you choose to do with your hair, and a lot of the people who wrote essays in my book talk about this, is you have to feel comfortable with yourself. You have to feel comfortable with your authentic self and understand, why am I doing it the way I'm doing it? Am I doing it to please someone, or am I doing it to please me? If you're doing it to please yourself, then that's good. Then keep doing that. Obviously, take care of your health and things like that, but don't try to please anyone else. You need to understand that you are you, and you're beautiful just the way you are.
Powerful.
I know we would love to keep talking about this. I know we can, but we can't, unfortunately. And there were a few questions that we couldn't get to, and all these questions are profound and complicated, and they have to do with power and patriarchy and commerce and identity. Very, very deep issues, despite the kind of superficial sense that hair is a frivolous matter. It is not. I want to thank Ronnie and Yvette and Sean Murphy.
I just would like to say really quickly that you can go to Hair Goddess on Facebook. There is a Hair Goddess page here. No, yeah, Hair Goddess book on Facebook, in case. And I post articles to try to talk about what we're talking about, and you can contact me there. And then, of course, you can get the book Hair Goddess.
And you can also listen to Yvette's podcast. Tell me the name of your podcast.
Yes, it's the Positively Joy podcast. And we did a whole week on hair from gray hair to cutting off dreadlocks to going bald and actually shaving your head because of health issues. It was a really interesting week of conversations.
Yeah,
and that's archived. That's archived on there.
Yeah, so Positively Joy, you can just, it's very easy to get. And
positivelyjoy.com.
And to people who say, how can we change some of the pressure that women are under to look great and be young and all that, maybe the pandemic will change it a little, because guess what? It's not ending anytime soon. So, but I do want to thank everyone for coming and for participating and asking questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all your questions. There will be videos of each session on the website, so that if your friends couldn't see it, they can see it again. And 1455 is a nonprofit. This event was free, but we would love, the organization would love to have donations, even if it's $5 or $10. Think about how much enlightenment and entertainment and company you got just being here with all of us, and how much we got from you. And all you need to do is to go to 1455 Literary Festival website, and there's a button that says support, and press that button and put in some money. Put in $5 or put in 500. Anyway, I'm so sorry we can't get to everyone's questions, but I'm so grateful to everyone who came.
Thank you, Liz, so much. Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you, Yvette. And Liz, thank you so much.
Okay, and thanks everyone for being here with us. Okay.
Okay, bye everybody. Thanks for.
Bye.